on Aphorisms 69?
No, that was it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. So thank you.
Oh no. Seriously? Okay. All right. All right. So I guess we're all just gonna kind of go with what I had to say about it. So aphorism 70 is called Women Who Master the Masters. And I found this really, really interesting. Let me see here. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Elizabeth Holmes. She was the founder of Theranos until she wound up going to jail. But she made a point of creating a masculine sounding voice for herself so that when she presented herself to men, funders, people who, would give her money to keep her operation going, she sounded more authoritative. And I have a feeling that that's what Nietzsche is really getting at here. Yeah, Oscar.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering. You said you went to jail. Can I ask what you went to jail for?
Fraud. But we're
Fraud.
not really talking about her. That was just an example that
Oh,
I
I'm
brought
sorry.
of a woman who deliberately developed an alto voice. Okay. So nobody has any thoughts on this either? Audrey.
Hey, hi.
Hi.
Well, I didn't know that. That's actually interesting. And I didn't really pay much attention to this one, as I have to say, because I didn't remember it. I read it a few weeks ago, and then I just followed, started with 71 again. But anyway, the ones that what I underlined was such lovers are unconvincing, such voices always retain some motherly or housewifely coloration. So most of all when they make one think of love. I mean, this is just, very interesting, a very interesting bias that I found. It irritated me. I mean, I love Nietzsche, so it's very interesting that this really just irritated me, this particular one. And I just, was wondering if I was going to take the rest of them seriously, but there's other things that I've underlined, and I'm interested in like what other people actually think, because this is somebody that, I don't usually criticize Nietzsche, actually. I always find something very meaningful in what he has to say, and I'm playing with the times of that, that he was in, and the issues that he had with women in general, and his own health and all of that. But still, I found it irritating. So, I mean, it's interesting, your example, but I don't understand where you think that Nietzsche is coming from when you say that this is what he's talking about, that we need to change our voices, or that he thought it was an important thing to do, or it's hard to know. I know that he just says things, and it's more about observation rather than a judgment. So that, is something that I could say, oh, Nietzsche notices that. But I got the impression that you might be saying that he meant something by it. So anyway.
Well, what I meant was an elaboration of I think it's the second sentence. And it's, we believe that somewhere in the world there, because of the sound of the voice, there could be women with lofty, heroic, and royal souls, capable of and ready for grandiose responses, resolutions, and sacrifices, capable of and ready for rule over men, because in them the best elements of man, apart from his sex, have become an incarnate ideal. And that made me think of Elizabeth Holmes, who wanted to present herself in that way. And I think that this is one of the few places where Nietzsche actually gives women a lot of credit. And that's why I sort of mentioned earlier that we need to sort of beware that his world, his patriarchal world, was very, very different from the world we live in today. And we sort of understand and take for granted that women more or less are like this. They don't need to have an alto voice to do it. But I found Elizabeth Holmes interesting as an example of what I think Nietzsche is talking about here. And
Okay.
I'm sorry, Audrey?
No,
Oh.
that makes sense.
Oh, okay, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I have a comment on a couple of your comments, and then I have a question for Audrey. I just wanted to say that I think it's important, at least for me, to contextualize um, this philosophically. It's important to be aware that the degree of patriarchy and sexism doesn't just vary by time; it varies by location and culture. I.e., when you say in this time, well, in this time, in this place, in Germany, but there's plenty of places in the world right now where there's degrees of patriarchy or sexism that are even greater than the environment that Nietzsche was in at that time. So I just wanted to make that point. And then my question for Audrey, if she wants to, an invitation, is I'm curious about your sense of irritation at this aphorism. If you want to elaborate on that a little bit, what that is, because I'd like to understand that better. That's it.
Oh, well, my irritation was with Nietzsche, and
Yeah.
I mean, in the wording. But and of course I know these are translations, and it's probably different in the other translation as well. So it's great if somebody's here that, actually speaks German and can say what he actually said. But that my irritation was that it was for a thinker like him, or the way I think he's a thinker, that it just fell into a stereotype kind of, rather
Yeah.
than just culture. So, and it could be the English translation. And I can't always explain my irritation, Mark, but I try.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to do that. It's driven by drives that you are not in touch with and don't understand. Okay, Barbara.
This kind of reminded me of, how uh, early Shakespeare, when Shakespeare was putting plays on, all the parts were played by men, and if it was a woman or something, it would be played by a boy. So there was something right there about how either women wouldn't be believable on a stage. They may have not been permitted, it might not have been done, but the idea that a male can portray lofty, heroic, a royal soul, is something that probably is traditional in the theater. And so he's just saying that an alto voice makes you feel like you're listening to a man, and so it gives what you're listening to a lot more authority. But then he undercuts it, as he often does at the end of these aphorisms. He says, however, it's hard to believe in it because you can trace the feminine aspect in it. So I'm not so sure that this is, I know Fred would, Fred were here, he'd probably be saying, oh, well, this is misogynistic. But I'm not sure it goes that far, but he is making commentary, I think, on women and how well they can portray on the stage the kind of inspiring, grandiose things that people like to see and like to think about and like to be inspired by. And he seems to be saying that it's harder for a woman to do. And I don't know if it is. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, the problem I was having with this was trying to figure out if he's talking about opera. And so because he mentions Romeo here, right? This is the one, right, where he mentions Romeo. Yeah. So what they are supposed to represent is usually the ideal male lover, such as Romeo. And it's just the sound that he's sort of talking about. So So the pitch is an alto voice for the male who is acting out the part. And I think he's being critical of that. I'm not sure I can make a convincing case of that, but the very last line, the one that Audrey was objecting to or found irritating, was such lovers are unconvincing. And what he's speaking of here is a lover like Romeo speaking or singing in an alto voice. Such voices all retain some motherly and housewifely coloration, most of all when they make one thing well. So I think he's sort of objecting to what may have been a theatrical convention at the time. You know,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'd like to
I
know
agree.
exactly. It might be time. I don't know, Lindsay. What do you think? I mean, how much
I'll just
are we going to listen to?
wait, I'm doing a little bit of work here. Okay, Oscar, your hand's up.
It is. That's correct. It's up. And listen, in my opinion, the world is really about the vibes of the crew, and I just, for me, I struggle to believe in certain things that I see in other people. I disagree with, but I don't know how to say it because of the molecular kinesis of the situational lollipop. I don't know with the screen or the iPad. I just don't know where it leads certain people. And for me personally, I just don't see how gray hair can affect the world living 10-pound note.
I have no idea what you're talking about. We're discussing aphorism 70 in the gay science. What does any of
Yeah,
that have to do with
yeah.
it?
So that's the rotated version of the 70. I mean, it includes a bit of the 64. It's not massively, but it includes, if you actually look at 64, it includes some of that. And look, it's not about where you come from. It's more about where you see the life, visioning yourself. But to do that, you have to I just don't see the point of the world's living without the 17 or the 16, and look, Aspinall agrees with me, and I just don't think the 32 would match up with the 21 without the 64. That's just my opinion. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Well,
really.
if anybody knows what he's talking about, let me know. Mark.
Are you being disrespectful?
I don't think I'm being disrespectful. I still have no idea what you're talking about.
Wow.
Lindsay,
Mark.
can I speak? Yeah. So I just want to say, it's my opinion that the last speaker is just here to disrupt the conversation, and I'd be all in favor of just booting him out. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Now we're narrowing it all down here. Okay. No more thoughts on 70? Well, okay then. Oh, Barbara.
Well, I was just wondering if maybe he was, see, if he wasn't making a broader point, because I just looked up, there is an opera, but all the male roles have either tenor or other voices. There isn't a woman that plays Romeo or an alto that plays Romeo. So I was just wondering if maybe he wasn't trying to expand this to something else.
Well, that could certainly be. This is turning out to be a very interesting get together. Okay. I don't know if they all just got together and decided to have fun and screw around with all of us or not? So going on to 71. Let me see here. I thought this was a really interesting observation, and I think a lot of modern women can certainly identify with this whole idea, especially going back to the 50s and 60s, when sex was just something that just wasn't presented, and women were supposed to be so pure as the driven snow, so to speak. And I think that's the observation he's making here, that this is really a dangerous thing for the psychological well-being of women. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Barbara?
The one thing he does say that I thought was interesting is at the end of this, he says, women experience their men as a question mark regarding their honor. So all the shame that they've internalized, they now sort of project back onto their partners. So no matter how conventional the relationship is, there's still some undercurrent in it. And then he says something really interesting, that their children come back thing, that their children, they experience their children as an apology or atonement. They need children and wish for them in an altogether different way from that in which a man wishes for children. Now, that's true on the surface. Men want children so they can pass their property on, but women, he seems to be saying here, want children to validate their honor or their shame, to validate that they're good.
We'll never got one more to get rid of here. All righty. Would you mind repeating that? I was trying to figure out who was being disruptive, and I think
Yeah,
I did.
I totally appreciate it, and I think there's one more to go, honestly.
Yeah, I do too. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you repeat what you said, please?
The very end of this aphorism, he mentions that women regard their children, so they regard their husbands as in some way they have some tension there, that because they feel like they've been thinking of themselves as shameful, their sexuality is shameful, their husband's connected to that. And so he seems to be saying that women will always experience their men as a question mark regarding their honor, and their children as an apology or an atonement. They need children. And so the man sort of reflects back that idea that the woman is somehow intrinsically shameful because of her sexuality, but the children somehow absolve her of that. And so wanting children
finishes, and just like that, Leicester City pounds, and Leicester City will take.
You have to get rid of Oscar.
Leicester City pounds, and Leicester City will take.
What is with these people? You know?
Nah. Yeah, it wasn't me. It wasn't me, I promise you, please.
Okay, Oscar, you're out of here.
It's
So-
not me, I promise. You've got it wrong. I promise you it's not me. Please.
You're such
Well,
an
you seem to be enjoying this, Oscar. You know,
What
are
do you mean
you
enjoy-
are you here?
That's disrespectful.
Oscar,
That is just disrespectful.
Oscar,
That's
I'll let you
awful,
speak. I'll let you
Oscar.
speak.
Oscar.
I'm gonna let you speak, that's fine.
Okay, are you here to have a conversation about these aphorisms? Or are you here
Yes, I
to-
have been the whole time, but every time I put my hand up, you air me.
No, the Zoom is taking your hand down. I'm not doing anything. But
Oh,
trying to
but I
look
thought
for
you were
you.
taking my hand
Well,
down.
Zoom does that automatically, and I think you might have some experience with that, but I'm not sure. Okay, so
Oh dear.
moving on, Barbara. I think that that's part of what makes this so interesting for me. I don't know if it's true or
Excuse
not. I
me.
don't understand.
I've just been sent a message by Josh being told to shut the F up. So I really don't appreciate that.
Well, that's fine. You know, Oscar, I've had about enough, so. All right. Phew. Well, we're back to all the regulars at last. Gee, any Christmas. Okay. I think he's trying to understand something that he's probably the last person that ought to try to understand it. I'm going to go ahead and call on Mark, though, and let him speak. Mark.
Oh, thanks, Lindsay. I'm sorry. I've just been so distracted by the organized disruption of the group that I haven't
Yeah.
been able to
Yeah.
follow the conversation at all. And I just want to thank you for kicking all those people out. I thought you showed a lot of tolerance. I would say even a little too much, perhaps, but I'm glad they're gone. Thank you very much for getting rid of them.
You're welcome. You're
You
welcome.
showed a lot more tolerance than I would have, honestly.
Anyway, I think he's really trying to capture something here that I'm just sort of fascinated by the idea that because men were not really into I'm sort of guessing. I probably shouldn't proceed because I really don't know. But psychologically speaking, I think that it may not be true anymore. And the only reason I say that is because the whole nature of male-female relations is at a whole different level than it was in 1872 or 1950, 1960, where I think a lot of these remarks were really quite accurate. The whole idea of how shocking sex would be to somebody that has pretended it didn't exist at all. Um, and here, I'm going to just read this. And then to be hurled as by a gruesome lightning bolt into reality and knowledge by marriage, precisely by the man they love and esteem most, to catch love and shame and a contradiction, and to be forced to experience at the same time delight, surrender, duty, pity, terror, and who knows what else in the face of the unexpected neighborliness of God and beast. Now, there's a lot of rhetorical exaggeration going on there. There's another word for all of it, but I find that an extraordinary statement based on basically what the sensibilities were even in the 1950s. Barbara.
Yeah, I don't find this surprising. I mean, what he's really saying, and for once, I think he's psychologically so on point here, is that if you're shamed because of your sexuality into acting certain ways because society expects that of you, and then this is suddenly you're expected to act another way. But you've already internalized that idea that somehow you and your sexuality are shameful. And now your husband, you sort of project that back on him because you don't know what to make of this. You respected him enough to marry him, but now he's carrying with him that scary part, that shameful part. And he's probably coming from a different place, legitimately. So even if he's not a Stanley Kowalski, he's still um, a little bit scary because of what he represents, which is sexuality. So I really understand that. And I never thought, though, that women would take refuge from this feeling of internalized shame by having children, because children sort of validate not just who they are as women, but validate their own, what would you say, their goodness or virtue. I
Yeah.
never thought of that.
No, I never thought of that either. I thought that was a really interesting take. And often, and later on, he goes, Nietzsche writes, often a silence afterward, the same deep silence as before. often a silence directed at herself, too. She closes her eyes to herself. Young women try hard to appear superficial and thoughtless. The most refined simulate a kind of impertinence. And I think there's a certain truth to what he's saying about that. I'm saying, I think it needs we live in kind of extraordinary times. I haven't gone over all of this sort of thing, but the basic relations between men and women have changed so dramatically, and women have revealed themselves as complex creatures in a way that was just not taken for granted back in the old days. And this turning on herself, that scene strikes me as so honest. Audrey.
Yeah, everything seems honest in this particular one. It's interesting because when I first read it, it was more about, I was thinking of, the upper class women, because that's what he starts out. It's upper class women, the education of them. And so that's what he's talking about, like not just women. So, and I guess that's his experience. I mean, I don't know how many uh, women, in lower classes that he dealt with other than prostitutes. So I think he's got that one down, I mean, in terms of the upper class woman who's tried so hard. I've certainly seen enough movies and enough and read enough books, period books about the same thing, and he seems to be right on top of it. And in terms of the silence afterwards, that silence afterwards is actually a screaming in my mind. And it's a very, very, I mean, I really couldn't squeeze my hands after I read this one, which, sometimes when I have some deep feeling of something, I can't squeeze my hands because I feel it viscerally. And I never quite understood what it was. I thought it was like more scary stuff, but it happened in this one aphorism, which I found really interesting. And I'm far from an upper class woman, but I definitely get it. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, that's sure. I think that more women today would be respected as upper class women than in his day, particularly because I think, more people are well off. It's not back then, and I'm supposing this is true. The aristocratic class was a smaller group of people, and they all had money, and everybody else didn't. And so today, everybody's sort of, well, they used to be kind of middle class. And so that, as an observation about upper class women specifically, may not actually be accurate. I was tending to think of it as just a realization of women's first experience of intercourse in the absence of any prior knowledge of what intercourse is.
Right,
There's no.
yeah, no, I see, that makes sense, yeah. But it's not, upper class in his time is not just about money, it's about name and property.
Mhm.
And,
That's
and upper class now is all about money.
yeah.
So it's very interesting. So I would imagine that his upper class women get more respect than the women here.
Yeah.
With
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I think the point about class is pretty important. My general impression is that cross cultures and societies, at least as far as class societies go, um, suppression of female sexuality is more intense in the upper class than in the lower class. And the primary reason for that is because the upper class have property, and for that to be passed from father to son, female fidelity is necessary and important. It's not so important for families that don't have any property. It doesn't have the same kind of consequence. So Nietzsche, being kind of part of the elite and dealing with that, and also the fact that women in general, especially in Germany, 19th century, um, were so repressed. I think he's probably pretty isolated from female culture. Like the two, I mean, there's a separate male and female culture even in art, way less than back then. And then you have the class divide as well. So I think what he's talking about is probably accurate for the elite strata of women. I'm not sure that that applies to women overall in Germany. I kind of suspect that it does not, at least not nearly as much. I'm wondering if anybody else has any comments. That's it. Thank you.
Well, I think this is really just a comment on sexual repression and how it's damaging to women's psychic state in the world. And I really do. I think that's what he's trying to demonstrate here, or not demonstrate, but observe, Audrey.
Well, just to speak to Mark's point, I'm wondering, Mark, because I mean the sexual repression is even in the lower classes. It's just that it's not it's not for the same reason. I mean, they would just be considered whores or something, and their own fathers who don't own property would call them a whore too. So it's when they don't repress it. So I think that you know, being taught a particular way of female virtue, regardless of your class, will create a certain silence at some point when realism uh, comes on. I mean, when you sort of become aware of what it's really like, and which could be the first sexual experience or the third one, you know, or just how you treat it on the street. You know, there's a class thing going on and the fact that you're a woman, so it's a double whammy in some way. And I would say that that silence that happens afterwards, or the stoicism that it looks like, isn't quite that. And I think that they're screaming, that silence it's still that screaming, and you're making me not be able to squeeze my hands again.
Barbara.
Well, this may make it worse, but I think you could extend this, I think, to almost any truth that gets repressed. That somehow you can't just ignore it. It will go back inside you, and then you will
Right.
project it back out. So it's a pretty powerful psychological insight here. I have to give him credit for that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, good.
I have
Okay.
a question that's not related. I'm finding that having my iPad and the text next to my computer, I've lost the capability of the cursor. It's going only to the text. Should I turn one of them off? I don't know how to proceed, because I
I
can't
don't,
even like silence myself.
well, don't worry about that. It's, as long as you can put your virtual hand up. I don't know what to tell you. That's something I haven't heard of before. 71. We're not there yet, Barbara. You wanted me to go there now, or
Oh, did I mistype? Sorry.
is that a
No.
prompt?
No, Jason had a
Get on
question
with
and
it.
I messed up.
Hi, Jason.
Oh,
Okay,
aren't we on
Audrey,
71?
No, it is.
I don't know what to tell you.
We're on 71, right?
Yeah, we are on 71.
We
Yeah.
are on 71.
Yeah, Jason didn't
We
know where
are.
we
We
were.
are on 71. That's right. Okay. I didn't realize what you were asking. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Okay. So are we done with that?
Sure.
I guess we are. Okay, moving on to 72. Let's see, what kind of note did I put on this one? 72. Oh, creative souls are feminine in that their creation is a type of giving birth. This is not an unconventional thought to have. And but he wanders around it here a lot. I think I now talk about getting a little annoyed. It's difficult to sort this one out because he's talking about animals and then he's talking about women as well. And I think fundamentally it's sort of just the idea that when he's referring to spiritual pregnancy, this is the artistic person with some idea. And a man, I'm supposing as well, produce the character of the contemplative type, which is closely related to the feminine character. It consists of male mothers. And I think that he would, I think this is another unusual look at gender, maybe without gender having been defined in those days, that I think it's really fascinating that he's sort of suggesting that creative men are demonstrating a certain feminine quality that's good, that I think he's approving of and accepting of, and just trying to throw out there. I imagine this would have had a little more impact in its day than it probably does today, but I sort of think that's what he's getting at here. Jason.
Yeah. First, I think the spiritual pregnancy probably related to Plato's Symposium and the Theaetetus. They talk about male deliver the truth or whatever. Okay, so I think there's two things. One is talking about the male sex is considered a beautiful sex, and talking about the male pregnancy, so spiritual pregnancy. And another way, make fun of the highly appreciate the motherly love. I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's what Nietzsche is talking about. The motherly love, just the desire to dominate a possession and an occupation. So I think that's the two sides. In the way he put down on the nature motherly love, in the way he appreciate the male pregnancy, spiritual pregnancy. Okay, then this one. And finally, he said the animal, the male sex is considered a beautiful sex as a conclusion. I think that's this aphorism is about. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I share.
Yeah, that last line kind of throws me for a loop. I'm not quite sure. That seems to be coming out of just like nowhere. I'm not sure what he's actually trying to say there. It seems sort of just thrown on there for the heck of it or something. I'm not really sure. Mark.
Yeah, with reference to the last line, I wonder if he's not possibly making a morphobiological commentary rather than a social psychological. My general impression amongst non-human animals, males generally have a lot of physical attributes which seem to have evolved in order to attract mates. Like the peacock is the most obvious example, but amongst a lot of birds, males are more colorful. And there's also a lot of behaviors too, like there's dancing and singing rituals amongst a lot of animals where males perform these activities in order to show some kind of attractiveness, which seems to be kind of the inverse of what's dominant in human civilization culture. So I wonder if he's not commenting on that. If he's not, I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe he's not saying that. But just from a biological standpoint, that's something that occurs to me. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like a gratuitous observation to me that it just doesn't fit where the rest of it seems to be, at least in my head. Well, whatever. Oh, Audrey.
Yeah, there's a note here, and I guess it's from Kaufman on mine. It says Nietzsche
Yeah.
does not explain all feminine characteristics sociologically. See sections 68 and 71, but gives some weight to biological factors as well. So I think, Mark, you're right on. That it's, yeah. And I think
Yeah.
and I think that we know it now because, I mean, he must have always known it from his own experience. But to him, it's still a surprise, where to us, it's not a surprise. So maybe that's why he throws it in at the end, but it's definitely biological. Well,
Yeah.
you call that biology, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Or instinct. I mean, I'm not sure. I agree that it's all biological, but it's interesting. I don't know if instinct is really biological, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know where to go with that, Barbara.
Yeah, I think our understanding of nature and nurture is so nuanced at this point that it's even hard to have a conversation with it about it. But I was thinking though that the last line, as Mark was talking, he just seems to be saying that if males among animals are beautiful and generative, and then it's natural for everyone, including people who would be classed as animals in this case, to have an innate creativity that's not something tacked on, not something social or conventional, but something that is innate. And so he might be saying that when he talks about how the male sex is that there are male mothers, and that among animals the male sex is considered beautiful. He's kind of like saying we share in that nature and we're like that too. So it legitimizes every instinct for art making or creativity or something. So when people say, for example, well, it's natural to be violent, or it's natural to, for the winner to take all, it's like, well, he's saying it's also natural for human beings to be creative and generative too.
Yeah, yeah, I think he's saying that as well. I just this struck me as more of another comparison between men and women, and sort of saying like men that these feminine characteristics can also be experienced by men, but mentally and not necessarily physically. I mean, as like giving birth. How many times have we heard artists referred to that way? I've heard it a lot, and so this seemed familiar to me from that point of view. There's the gestation period, and then boom, and they, a lot of times men will refer to their books as their babies, this sort of thing. I've heard this before too. So that's what I'm thinking of, Jason.
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't join the earlier section, but I read through the few from 69 to 70 something. To this point, I feel well, you can call him misogyny, but in a way, he's not targeted on all women. I think he targeted on the high society female during that time. Okay, they are shallow, they are manipulous. Okay, I think that's his problem. Not the female in general, more on the society. This kind, because you look at 70, he talk about women who master the masters. Seems like talking about they are manipulating. They seems they are weak, but they are controlling. And the 71 talk about female chastity. I think he really make fun of this kind of chastity. And right now he talk about motherly love, which is just the nature to dominate the possession and occupation. Then he switched the point, talk about male pregnancy, which is more spiritual, and then dropped the line. Well, in the real world or animal kingdom, the male are more beautiful. Not like I think that's he tried to do, So
Okay, that's interesting. Audrey.
Well, I still think though that I think you're right, Jason, but I think what he's been doing, and I don't know how chronologically he wrote these aphorisms. So I don't know like what follows what, but it looked to me like some kind of little trajectory that now he starts out with something that's sort of more obvious, and then he's bringing it to human beings and the way we construct how we want to present ourselves. And I think what he's saying here is that, among animals, the male is considered the beautiful sex. You know, it's sort of like saying what you were saying before, Lindsay, that it's natural. It's something that, you know, there's all different types of personalities in the animal kingdom. We should start accepting all the different personalities in our society, and that we're not. And he's observing that we're not, and he's using examples that I would imagine his readers, which are educated people, are reading, or would read if he could sell his books, and that's what they're talking about. Like, you know, society is creating something that's not natural, and they're doing it in such a way that they're limiting these possibilities. So to me, he's the first gender bender.
Yeah,
Now,
no,
yeah. So
I really like that. I like what you said. Yeah, and the charge of misogyny is too easy to level
right.
carelessly. And I think that's what happens a lot with some people who read Nietzsche and get just some kind of mistaken impressions from a few. That's why I find this whole idea of going through these aphorisms, all of them, getting through all of them, talking about all of them, reveals that he's a more sensitive soul than I think a lot of people give him credit for. I always thought it was anyway. Anyhow, we're sort of at the end of this one. Okay, so we will not be together again for 3 weeks. No Christmas Day, no New Year's Day. I'm not going to do it.
Only 2 weeks. Only 2 weeks we take off, right? Then we come back.
Well, next week is Christmas. The week after that is New Year's, and the third week is when we'll be back again.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will put out the notice somewhere along the line, probably closer to the actual get together again, so that it will seem fresh, although you guys seem to be coming back. Jason, you might want to watch the recording of this one just a little bit, because we had a bunch of bombers here for the first 10 or 15 or 20 minutes or however long it took.
Okay, so it's very good,
Broke
very
out.
problematic. Well, I always watch, and then I have a summary on that. Okay.
Okay.
I have a summary on that, and then if you have time and read the summary, and it's AI summary, and I kind of experimenting, and it's a few process I do. I use a Zoom summary, convert to PDF, and use the ChatGPT to rewrite it, and let ChatGPT take out the speaker's name. Okay. Become an essay, and see how it. Well, give me a feedback. Okay, so stupid or wonderful or nonsense. Anything is fine. So.
Okay. Mark, last word.
Yeah. So we're reconvening on January 8th.
Yeah.
Aphorism 73.
Right.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you guys.
Thanks for hosting.
As always,
See you in a couple weeks.
have a wonderful holiday. Hanukkah starts on Christmas Eve, so it's like everybody's celebrating at the same time.
Oh,
so
okay.
have a happy whatever it is that you're doing for the holiday, and we'll be in 2025 the next time we all get together. Where did 2024 go? Oh my God. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll see you next year.
Happy holidays.
Happy